The Russo-British Chamber of Commerce webinar series. My name's Alf Torrance. I'm the Executive Director of the RBCC, and I'm delighted to once again welcome the British Ambassador to Russia, Her Excellency Deborah Bronnett, and Trevor Lewis, Head of the Department for International Trade. Unfortunately, Sarah Pilbeam, who normally fields questions about visa issues, is not available today. However, if there are any questions that the Ambassador or Trevor can't answer, I'll pass them on and she's promised to get back to you. I'd also like to give a big thanks to KPMG, who are today's event sponsors. And of course, thank you to all you RBCC members and friends for joining us today. Before we get started, I'll just spend a couple of minutes covering the ground rules on how the webinar will run. After I've finished, I'll invite the Ambassador and Trevor to make some opening remarks. You may want to put questions to the Ambassador and Trevor, so please use the chat room function. We will be monitoring it and we will try and pick out some of the more popular themes. Basics, but please keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking. We've also received some written questions that I'll try to get through the best I can. As always, we'll record the webinar and post it on the website later today or tomorrow. Ambassador, very many thanks for once again taking the time to speak to the Russo-British business community. I think this is the 5th such event we've run together, and I know it's very much appreciated by everyone. Since we last spoke in December, flights between the UK and Russia have been suspended, and the vaccination program in both countries has gotten to full swing. How do you see things developing over the next few months?
So thank you, thanks very much, and good afternoon to everyone on the call. It's great to have this opportunity to talk to RBCC and the business community. And as this, I think it's the first one we've done in 2021. So maybe if I can just start by wishing everyone on the call and their families, well, I think this year has to be a healthy and successful 2021. And I think, I know I'm speaking for many of us in the embassy, and I suspect for many others, we're rather hoping that 2021 will be rather better for all of us than 2020 has been. Yes, as we were coming towards the end of 2020, I think we were all hoping that 2021 would start in a really positive way, but I'm afraid COVID had another surprise for us with the particularly a more infectious strain of the disease that was identified in Kent. And we saw again a very large increase in cases in the UK, and obviously we're now, the UK went back, or I should say England went back into lockdown, and the other nations of the UK, many of them were in lockdown or in having a lot of restrictions. So we didn't end 2020 in the way that we'd hoped, and we didn't start 2021 in the way that we had hoped. However, I think, after huge human cost, and I'm conscious that that cost is ongoing, things do seem to be improving in Russia and in the UK, and in Russia, it certainly feels as if hospitalizations are falling and case numbers are stabilizing, falling after a pretty big surge in the autumn and winter here too. And of course we're seeing in Russia the rollout of vaccines, which again is very positive. The vaccine rollout here is a bit slower than it is in the UK, but it's certainly comparable to many other countries. So I think that's positive, but of course, as we learned towards the end of 2020, we do need to be careful and be cautious. In the UK, after again a really grim winter, the situation does seem to be improving rapidly, and I suspect many people on the call will have heard our Prime Minister's announcement of a roadmap on Monday this week. We've seen that both the lockdowns across and restrictions across the UK, but also the mass vaccination programme, the vaccination programme is really starting to produce some really encouraging results. And certainly, I think more than a third of adults have now been vaccinated in the UK, and that is starting to feed through in a really clear way in terms of hospitalizations and the other indicators. So that's all very positive, but as I said, we have learned that we need to be careful and cautious. So even though we now thankfully have a plan, the plan is dependent on certain criteria being met, depends on the vaccine rollout continuing to go well, it depends on what's going on with hospitalizations and death. It depends on that easing restrictions doesn't run the risk of another surge in infections. And of course, we're keeping an eye on new variants, and that's one area where the UK is leading the world actually with our ability to identify what's going on with COVID, and we're offering that capacity to other countries that need it too, as we're seeing new strains being identified in many, many places. I'm sure that we're all, I think, rather focused. You mentioned, Alf, the suspension of flights. That, of course, is a Russian decision. It's not a UK decision, but certainly we've seen many more restrictions and new rules in the UK too. And at the moment in England, it is not lawful for people to go on holiday overseas. I'm sure you'll have seen that 17th of May was announced as the first date, assuming all the criteria continue to be met, for relaxation of possible relaxation of travel restrictions from the from London. We've seen, as I said, the Russian government took the view, decided to suspend direct flights. I think in light of the news about the new strain that was identified, that currently will run out on the 16th of March. Obviously, I think we are all hoping that the better news that's coming from the UK will continue to improve, and that will create the conditions where, for both sides, things will, more normal travel will be able to resume. Maybe a word about travel passports and so on. This is certainly something that I think is being looked at both in the UK and elsewhere, but I know, I think IATA is very active on this, but there's nothing yet that's been agreed internationally. So we'll have to see when something, if anything, is agreed. But I think that's something that we're keeping a close eye on. Maybe just on vaccines, COVID is, as we know, a global problem. I mean, one of the things I think that we in the UK are very proud of is the role that we are playing in trying to ensure that poorer countries, developing countries, have access to vaccines. I'm not sure if we're still the biggest donor, biggest contributor to the international mechanism for this, for COVAX, but certainly we've contributed £548 million, I think, into COVAX, and we saw today the first major shipment of COVAX vaccines, and it's the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine that's been shipped out to Ghana. So that's something that continues to be a big priority for us, and an area where we will continue to be very active. Maybe a little bit about embassy activity, and I should say, sorry, the political backdrop, as everyone on the call will be aware, that we continue to have a really complicated and difficult bilateral relationship. Also, the wider relationship between Russia and I guess Western countries in more generally is extremely tense and combative. I can say more about that if you're interested, but that's, that is certainly a significant factor and a significant backdrop for our work, although it is not stopping us continuing to engage and work with the Russian state and the Russian government, as well as with people across Russia. In terms of the embassy and indeed our Consulate General in Yekaterinburg, of course, COVID continues to have a big impact on our activities. Trevor and I were talking earlier this week about how frustrating it's been that we haven't been able to do all the things that we had planned for 2020, for early 2021. But we are looking ahead to both how we can continue to do more in a digital or imaginative way and COVID safe way, but also hoping that over time and as we move towards spring and summer, we can start opening up activities again and working out how we can continue to support business, British business, and sanctions compliant trade. So I'm quite hopeful, but you know, I have we're all learning to be cautious. Maybe since we last spoke, the UK obviously has now left the transition period that we have with the EU. So we are now fully outside the EU. We left with an agreement, a trade agreement with the EU, which I think was very positive. But we are now outside of those rules. Colleagues of ours have worked incredibly hard to make sure that we now have free trade agreements with current countries that cover about 80% of UK trade, which I think is a real testament to the hard work and to what can be done despite COVID and despite all the constraints that our colleagues were under. We've I think agreed trade deals with 64 countries as well as the EU. So that's pretty unprecedented. We've got negotiations underway with the US, Australia, New Zealand. We've said that we want to join the CPTPP, the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. So the UK will continue to be very active on the trading front. Now, Russia, of course, isn't part of any of those deals, and Russia didn't have a trade deal with the EU, so we didn't have an agreement to roll over. But our bilateral trade with Russia, despite COVID, has stood up pretty well. And again, I think we were rather pleased to see that. And we've got total trade in goods and exports between the UK and Russia, in goods and services, sorry, exports plus imports between the UK and Russia was £13 billion in the 4 quarters to the end of Q3 2020. That's a fall of around 10%. But you know, given the context, we were pleased. I think that it stood up that well. Russia was the UK's 22nd largest trading partners. I think that is going to that with the new figures that continues. So again, even though Russia isn't a priority for us in terms of the free trade agreements, and we've got a lot that we're doing on, and our colleagues are doing on that side, you know, there's a lot that we want to achieve in terms of supporting trade, bilateral trade between the two sides. I think I'll probably leave it there to allow lots of time for questions. And I don't know if Trevor wants to come in and add anything on some of the priorities for his team. But I know that we, as I say, we are hoping that we'll have more scope to do more in 2021 than we could in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely, Ambassador, and that's certainly very much the plan I have in mind, really. I guess, you know, in terms of what our focus might be, my sort of, you know, primary focus at the moment, you know, which won't be lost on people from business, is securing our budget for next year. So once I know what the budget is from the 1st of April, I have a better idea of what we can do. And then I guess it's honing in a little bit on some of the sectors. So the sector focus that we've got in mind at the moment is clean energy is going to be a very big one for us. As many of you will know, it's the COP26 year, so we'll be hosting that in Glasgow. So in the run up to that, we want to do a lot more around clean energy, but not just in the run up to that, because I suspect a lot of the work on this, bearing in mind some of these technologies will take a long time to implement and get the benefits from, is work beyond that. But we're certainly speaking to quite a few people around that. We want to see where we can go with a specific sort of look at hydrogen, renewables, waste to energy. I think it's probably fair to say that Russia is perhaps a hesitant partner on this journey at the moment. But actually, given the size of Russia, the natural resources, the oil and gas industry, our view is that even if we only get a very small percentage of the business that emanates from that, that's actually a considerable sum of money and offers considerable potential to the UK. And obviously, as time goes on, then these opportunities should hopefully grow. So that's certainly the view we have on that. So we're doing quite a lot of work on that. A services focus. I think I mentioned on earlier calls that we had some research done for us, I guess just pre-COVID, but I don't think things will have changed too much since then, which suggested there's approximately $1.4 billion that the UK is potentially missing out on in the services sector. So there's some specific areas we're looking at there around financial and legal services. I don't realistically think we'll be able to grab all of that $1.4 billion, but again, if we get a percentage of that, then that could be a good business for the UK. So we're looking at how best to do that. And obviously, like in any of these things, very keen to hear from RBCC members and other people on the call if they've got any ideas where they could collaborate with us. We have our own ideas, but that doesn't necessarily mean we've always got the right ideas. So we're always keen to listen to ideas and sort of, touch points where we perhaps missing things. Healthcare is another one that we're looking at. Obviously, vaccines and things is very much in focus at the moment, but we're also doing some work around oncology and cardiology, where we see some niche potentials for the UK and the UK business. So we're looking at that. And retail, obviously, the Russian economy is struggling. So at the lower end, it's perhaps not the sort of market that we're looking at, but I think towards the middle classes and those who have still got significant spending power, and it's quite clear from what we see that those people have retained that spending power, then there's still quite a lot of opportunity, I think, for UK luxury goods and sort of, mid-level retail. But linked to that, I think very much, and we are doing some separate work on this around e-commerce. We've got some figures, obviously, and it's not a great surprise to anybody because I think this has happened globally, really, that a lot of people who've been locked at home have been doing a lot of online shopping. So people are much more comfortable, I think, with online shopping in Russia than perhaps they were before COVID. And we need to sort of look at how we might benefit from those opportunities. So we're doing some more work there, trying to develop the links. I had a conversation and a separate Zoom call earlier on around fintech and how we might sort of use that in the sort of space of e-commerce as well. So some work around there, and then agri-tech as well, agricultural technology, sort of new ideas that can help Russia grow both its plant life and its animal life and make those more profitable. So we've got some good expertise from the UK that we should be offering more in Russia. So we'll be doing more to that. That's not an exhaustive list of all the sectors that we're working on. I say we're very open to ideas from RBCC members if they've got things that we can do with limited resources, as we all have, but very happy to listen to those ideas. And Alf knows I'm always happy to speak to people. It doesn't mean we'll always be able to deliver on some of these things, but if we don't know what the ideas are and if we don't hear direct from business where the opportunities may be, then there's quite often a good possibility that we're missing out on them. So by all means, feed the ideas in either through Alf or direct to me. And then just a couple of areas around, this is obviously very much dependent upon travel, but regionalisation, by which I mean regionalisation in Russia and regionalisation in the UK as well. So on the Russia side, I've been very conscious, and again, when I say we've lost the best part of the year really with COVID, but I'm very conscious that our focus has primarily been on Moscow and St. Petersburg, which is quite right, although we've not been, I know we've got some colleagues from St. Petersburg on today, but not been as sort of visible in St. Petersburg as we would like. We have been trying to do some things, and we've got a few ideas, and obviously, as the ambassador was saying, once we can get back up and running, we'll obviously have a more sort of, busy program of activity in Moscow. But I'm also very keen that we get out to some of the other regions where we haven't been seen for a while. Obviously, we've got the Consulate General in Ekaterinburg, and they're feeding in some thoughts to us, but we're looking a little bit beyond there. We're looking to get my team down to Rostov and some of the other cities, so we get some feedback direct from people on where those opportunities may be. And the reality may be that when we do get to them, actually we find that there isn't enough there for British companies. But I guess the problem is that in some of these places for a number of years we haven't haven't actually been to them. So I'm quite keen that I get down there and some of my team get down there, so that at least we get the feedback and get some ground truth, if you like, on where the opportunities might be, and see if there's more that we can build. Because certainly when we get down to the regions, we find we're very well received, and people come up with some quite surprising ideas that without visiting ourselves we might be missing out on. And I guess my final point there is just about the UK outreach into the region. So again, we do quite a lot of work in London, which makes sense, but we haven't been out as much to devolved administrations and to some of the regions. So I'd like us to try and do some more roadshows, as we call them, but basically surgeries, if you like, which seem to go down quite well. I'd rather see half a dozen companies in Leeds than sort of 115 in a big event, but half a dozen who come specifically to talk about opportunities in Russia, because that really sort of zooms in on what their business is and where we can help them. So I want us to be able to do a bit more of that into sort of towards the end of the financial year. I guess realistically we're looking September, October time now, but I'm certainly keen that we do that and get the teams out to speak to companies in the regions. I've got a webinar coming up, for example, with colleagues in the Northwest. I did one with Yorkshire and Humber, and they've been well attended, and there's been some good feedback, and we've had some good leads from them and companies that we can help. So that's kind of the focus as far as regionalisation is concerned. So I think that's all I've got to add for now. Thanks, Alf. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Ambassador, and thank you, Trevor, for a very useful overview. You've touched on a lot of subjects there, and actually we've had a lot of questions submitted already, which also overlap with some of the topics you touched upon. So I'll dive straight into the questions, if I may. The first is on a theme, so I'll include a couple of the questions in one. And I think, Ambassador, if you wouldn't mind starting, would you mind commenting on whether you've had any discussions about Sputnik vaccine with representatives in the UK? And in a similar vein, how will the UK government recognise the Sputnik vaccine so Brits or Russians who have had this vaccination in Russia can enter the UK without going through the usual quarantine and all the usual process that people are having to go through at the moment?
No, thank you. Really good question. So I haven't had discussions with people it depends what you mean with people in the UK, but of course, one of the things that we are doing is reporting on a very regular basis about what is happening with the development of all the vaccines in Russia, and the processes which are going through here, and reporting that back into the UK. None of the Russian vaccines so far have decided to apply for approval either in the UK and I gather not either in Europe. I checked that this morning. Although I think Sputnik V, I think they have started the process of seeing if they can get, it's one of the World Health Organization approvals. I think they've started that. So the position in the UK, sorry, it's WHO pre-qualification status, I think is what they've applied for Sputnik, but I don't think that's complete yet. In the UK, the approach we've taken to vaccines is that we've taken a portfolio approach to our vaccine, and we've sourced them from actually lots of different places. The key thing for us is that they are approved in the UK by our regulator or by a regulator that's equivalent. That hasn't happened yet. As I say, if the Russians decide to put any of their vaccines through the European process or apply for UK approval, or continue with the World Health Organization, I mean, all of that is very positive, but that's what they would, for us to recognize it. It's the same rule as for everybody else. You have to go through the normal approvals process. I'm just sort of, I should say that one thing I do think was really welcome was that for Sputnik V, when the Russian Institute, when Gamaleya put forward the results and got them published in the Lancet, it's not equivalent to approval, but it's still a really welcome step forward in terms of transparency and access. And that's certainly something that we've been encouraging and welcoming. have I answered that question? I'm just thinking. Oh, in terms so in terms of if that turns into, you know, how do you then mean that it's properly approved internationally? Look, I think we're at very early stages of looking at sort of, you know, vaccine passports and all of that sort of thing. A lot of countries, including the UK, are thinking about this. There are a lot of issues. I think we will have to have some kind of international process of checking that vaccines you know, are recognised internationally, but it will be up, I think, to individual countries to put their vaccines forward for that recognition. So it will be a question for the Russian authorities. So in the UK, for example, we don't have a national vaccine. We've got the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, but they have put that forward to the WHO. They've got approval from the WHO. They've had approval, obviously, from the UK regulator, but they had to apply for it. They've had approval from the European regulator. Again, they had to apply for it. So it's really up to those, the institutions, the companies who are making these vaccines to put them forward for regulatory approval, and that's the way that we can all be confident that you know, international standards or equivalent standards are met.
Great, thank you very much. I think to mix up the flow of this, I will ask, we have someone who wants to ask a question directly. So James, Nixie, if you can hear me, please unmute yourself and ask the question yourself, please. James, are you out there? Okay. James, are you there?
Name?
No. Okay. We'll come back to James if he comes back on later. A second question is on the sanctions. And the question is, amidst new sanctions from the EU against Russia, what will be the position of the UK towards trade economic relationships with Russia? I suppose, are they going to take an independent stance?
So we've left the European Union, so we now have our own sanctions legislation. In terms of the poisoning by Alexei, or the poisoning of Alexei Navalny by Novichok, I think it is shocking that you know, a Russian citizen was poisoned, and that when he returned to Russia, he's been locked up on the basis of a charge that the European Court of Human Rights has judged arbitrary. So we took action. We introduced some new named sanctions in October. I think it's October. You know, we have our own legislation. We will take our own decisions, but what we don't do is sort of announce those before decisions are made. There's a sort of thorough process. What we continue to do is support sanctions compliant trade between the UK and Russia. You know, the RBCC, as you all know, is a bilateral chamber that both governments support, which is why I'm on this call. It's you know, Trevor has a whole team who are working hard on this. And the reason that we employ people to work in our embassy here with support from back in the UK is that we think trade and investment between the two countries is a positive thing. So that will continue, but that doesn't mean that we aren't appalled at the use of a banned chemical weapon in contravention of Russia's, and we want Russia to respect its international obligations under the Chemical Weapon Convention.
Thank you. Okay. James, we'll try again with James. James, are you there?
Ah, yes. Thank you. I got there this time. Sorry, I'm not quite sure what happened last time. Entirely my fault. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah. So I realized what you were just saying about, good afternoon, and I'm sorry to be late on this. I realized what you were just saying about sanctions, Ambassador, but as you know, the EU has just nominated 4 individuals for travel bans and asset freezes. That does leave us hanging a little bit. So it might be useful to know when we might be able to expect some form of announcement or how we're thinking about this, what the processes are involved in coming to a decision about whether we might follow the EU lead for starters. I'm not sure I'm getting through to you all, sorry.
No, you are, but I suppose I wouldn't frame it, if I may.
Yeah.
So we have a legal framework under which we can sanction individuals under the human rights legislation. It's for serious human rights abuses. That framework, there's quite a complicated process, because this isn't, there has to be proper evidence, that there has to be a full process that is gone through. It's not a Russia specific piece of legislation, and we've taken action against other nationalities where we are confident that there is sufficient evidence that individuals have been involved in serious human rights abuses. When we take that action, we try and notify the individuals concerned. There are processes, if they feel it's unjustified, there are processes that they can follow to dispute that. But I mean, what I'm not going to do is stand up and say, well, what we might do in a month or 6 months or whatever. That's a matter for the authorities.
I understand. Of course, fair enough. I assume the EU has evidence, as it has nominated them, if you're looking for any.
It's sorry, we've left the European Union, so we're not sitting in the room. We've left the European Union. We have our own independent processes, and we wouldn't depend on the EU for those sorts of listings. Just as we don't depend on the US or Canada or any other country. That's something that our ministers will be very firm about now.
Okay, thank you.
Alf, I can't hear you.
Apologies. This question is definitely for Trevor, and it is asking if there's any current news from the State Ecology Group regarding municipal waste, especially regarding the situation in Moscow and St. Petersburg. I know it's a big area of potential cooperation, which has been bubbling away for some time, but probably not sort of moving forward as quickly as both sides would like.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Al. Thanks very much indeed. And obviously, I'm aware of the background, well, some of the background to this particular question. And of course, we took a mission over, over a year ago now, given COVID and things. But it's an area that we're very keen to develop. So I did sort of just ask my team to do a little bit of digging into this, and they've come up with some facts and figures for me. Not too long, you'll be pleased to know. But I think as we worked it out now, there's 176 regional sort of, basically waste operators now, covering 90% of Russian territory. So I think that suggests to you it's obviously an issue that the Russians are taking much more seriously as well now. And I remember when I just after I'd arrived, there was quite a lot of media coverage and some bad feeling about, I think it was up towards Archangel Square. There was this big tip and lots of stuff has been dumped. So I think it's becoming quite a political issue as well, domestic political issue. So I think it was quite, it's not too surprising that quite a lot of the sort of regional bodies have started to look much more closely at this. As we understand it, so 84% of the total coverage of waste disposal services is now in place. We're speaking to some of those people, not everybody, but certainly we're speaking to, obviously the particular question was around Moscow and St. Petersburg. So we are speaking to them, and that's beginning to head in the right direction. And as we understand it now, so I think the figures I got was 30% of the total solid waste has now been sent to sorting complexes, so suggesting that the system's beginning to grow, and that the targets of 50% of all waste by 2024 and 100% of all waste by 2030 goes to sorting complexes rather than to dumps. So that suggests that the system's falling into place. I guess where we need to look at this more closely from a purely commercial point of view is what we can do to make sure that there's UK expertise and UK technology in those sorting complexes, so that when the waste gets to there, it's not just sorted, but it's dealt with in a proper way. And I think I mentioned earlier on, one of the things that we're looking at under clean energy is waste to energy. So that will certainly, I think, be a factor that. So basically splitting the waste up into things that can be burned properly, things that need to be disposed of in different ways. So that's quite a long-winded way of saying that basically we're aware that the system's improving. We are reasonably well plugged into it, not just in in Moscow and St. Petersburg, but in the other regions of Russia. But we need to be able to convert that into something more concrete, and it's a work in progress. But I think David, who asked this question, and we're very happy, obviously, to be speaking to him direct on this, because we know he's got a very particular interest in this, but as do other people. But certainly an area where we're looking to do more work and where we see opportunities for the UK. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Trevor. Another question addressed to the ambassador, but I suspect it's more for Trevor. And it goes, do you think that the announcement that the Russian discount retailer Fixed Price is planning a listing in London could see the start of a trend of more Russian companies listing in London?
Well, I'm happy to take that, Alf, because it is something that we've been looking at. So I think a few years ago, we had quite a lot of Russian companies listing. I think particularly mining companies were well listed. So we're doing some work separately with the London Stock Exchange. It's an area of work that we would do, not just in Russia, but in many countries around the world. So I've done quite a lot of work on this in China and Malaysia and places, working with the London Stock Exchange to say what the offer is. So certainly one of the things I'd like to do, if we could make it happen, is bring a team out from the London Stock Exchange to make a presentation to interested companies in Russia, because obviously we want London to be a primary location, a primary destination for people to list. And the LSE has some great offers, not just in the main list, but in the AIM markets and the other markets as well. So that's an area that we're very keen to promote, and the London Stock Exchange is very strong. And obviously there's quite a lot of talk about competition across Europe, so we want London very much to remain the preeminent financial centre for Europe, if not the world. So we're very keen to attract Russian companies there and help them on that particular journey. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, the next question is definitely sort of would have been for Sarah Pilbeam as HM Consul General. I'll still ask it because I'm sure it will be of much interest to most of our listeners. And it's quite general. It just asks, what's the latest visa news for UK nationals currently in Russia? And I suspect it's related to the or relating to the presidential decree of 15th of December, in which it allows foreign nationals whose visas have expired to stay until the 15th of June, apart from those from countries where they were allowed to travel between the two countries, in which case they should leave by 15th of March. And of course, complicated by the fact that flights between the UK and Russia were then suspended. But anyways, I'll put that probably to you, Ambassador.
So I didn't catch the start of it, but I mean, obviously, we're really conscious that it's been a really difficult time for British nationals, both those who are here, but also we know that there's quite a lot of folks who are back in the UK who would rather be here but have found it difficult to come, or because of family circumstances are having to choose. So what we try to do is keep our travel advice as up to date as we possibly can, to try and help people make the best decisions they can in a set of really difficult circumstances. I didn't quite hear the beginning of what you said, but I hope that gives some.
Yeah, it was very.
If it's an individual, yes.
But just what the latest visa news is for UK nationals currently in Russia, and I think it's specifically about whether they'll have to leave at that earlier date of 15th of March rather than the later date of 15th of June, according to the December decree.
I think I'd want to check that with Sarah, to be honest, unless Trevor knows, because what I wouldn't want to do is say stay and then find that wasn't quite the right advice, because I know it is really complicated, and obviously the fact that flights are suspended, at least flights from the UK, at least you can't get on a flight from the UK directly to Moscow, I know sort of means that in practice it's very difficult for people to travel and to legally come back into the country.
Yeah, if it's all right, we'll get confirmation from Sarah. Just anecdotally, I've heard the Russian authorities won't make the exception because the flights have been suspended. So I think the advice is Brits should leave at the earlier date rather than holding on. But I'll get confirmation from the Consul General.
I would probably say that you can. I mean, I know that even though in theory flights are suspended both ways, Aeroflot are certainly still advertising flights going from Moscow to London. so it does seem to be possible for people to leave in a direct way, and they can certainly leave in an indirect way.
Great, thank you very much. Next question is, in your opinion, Ambassador or Trevor, whoever wants to take it, what are the prospects for a constructive UK-Russia cooperation in light of global economic upheaval due to the COVID-19 pandemic? And what type of approach or model of working, perhaps a new form of dialogue, is necessary for the UK to take up in order to ensure that the future relationship with Russia is consistent and coherent?
So I think that probably is one for me. Look, the bilateral relationship is really difficult, and it's very clear from our perspective that this is down to the behaviour of the Russian authorities, and the rhetoric that we're having, and it is very aggressive against the UK and against pretty much all Western countries. That isn't stopping us engaging and working on a whole range of things. I was talking to senior Russian actors this morning about climate change and COP26. We're very regularly in talking to the Minister of Foreign Affairs about Iran, the Middle East, some of the big global issues. We are continuing to talk to different Russian government and state entities about a whole range of subjects, and I'm very conscious that sort of on the economic and commercial side, life continues, and you made when Trevor was talking about the more work potentially going to London, and so there's a lot that continues to happen. Fundamentally, if there's going to be a much better political relationship, then we need to see a change in the behaviour of the Russian Russian government and state, and that isn't something that's something that we are saying very clearly. But that's a decision for the Russian authorities, not for us fundamentally. But that isn't stopping us, it's not stopping Russia talking to one another on a whole range of issues where our interests coincide, where as permanent members of the UN Security Council, we work together. And some of you will know the UK is chairing the Security Council this month. And all of this continues. We're both members of the G20 and so on. So there's a lot of, we're all in the WHO. There's a lot of collaboration that goes on, despite the fact that we do have some very fundamental disagreements.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is definitely for Trevor, I think. What's your opinion on changes in business regulations in the UK, and how will Brexit affect foreign companies and startups that intend to localize in the UK, new regulation and technologies, business processes, etc.?
Yeah, I think on that one, Alf, I would say it depends on the particular investment. Obviously, it's going to be sector by sector, industry by industry. What I can say is that we do quite a lot of work in terms of trying to attract Russian FDI into the UK, and actually for a very small team, which is actually one officer and a little bit of me, we do quite well. So even last year, which was quite a difficult year, we had 7 wins, as we call them, which was pretty good going. The year before, I remember the year before figures better actually, because it was 12 wins and it was over £60 million worth of investment and over 320 sort of premium jobs created, because again that's another one of the measures that we look at. So what are the jobs, basically what are the salary levels? So it's not all sort of necessarily sort of lower end wages as far as manufacturing is concerned, because the UK is not always going to be so competitive there. It's higher end jobs in finance, in ICT and things like that, and actually the Russian companies that we've been working with who are interested in the UK often fit that that profile very neatly. So we've done quite a lot in data and ICT, and we'd like to do more. And in fact, the Russian companies that we work with who have successfully invested in the UK have all been extremely helpful, and generally speaking are quite happy to share their own experiences, because it's not an easy thing to do anyway. There are real practical issues around setting up bank accounts and things like that. But as a team within the embassy here, and obviously working with our contacts back in London and our partners back in London, then we can help companies on that particular journey, and are very keen to do it. So I wouldn't want to get drawn into all the regulation, because it's going to vary from product to product, sector to sector. But I wouldn't think it's very much different now, you know, than it was before. It might change over time, and obviously we're keen to attract more investment. But generally speaking, the Russian companies that go in seem to do pretty well.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Next question is for the ambassador, and it asks, there seems to be a fair amount of news about Russian vaccines being exported abroad, but we don't seem to get any insight in the media here on how it's going in Russia. Do you have a view on how Sputnik is being rolled out across the country?
So I mean, my understanding is that I think, look, I don't have the exact figures, but I think it's a couple of million so far, with a higher percentage in Moscow. Trevor, I don't know if you've got the figures. So you know, I think, as I said at the beginning, I mean, clearly Sputnik, and many of you will know, certainly Sputnik V is widely available in Moscow. The opinion surveys seem to indicate that Russians are, you know, are one of the most populations which are least trusting of vaccines, and I suspect that has an impact on take up. It was something that we were concerned about in the UK, but thankfully for the vaccines that we've approved, we've had very, very high take-up rates, so sort of 90% plus. And I think we were actually a bit surprised by how high they were. But I think if you're eligible, my sense is it is readily available. Certainly in Moscow. I think it may be a bit more problematic out in some of the regions, although I know that the authorities are doing their best to open new vaccination centres in the regions as well. Does that answer enough of the question?
Yep, no, thank you very much. Trevor, anything to add or no?
Yeah, it was just to say, I think you're right, Ambassador. I didn't have the overall numbers, but the one thing that we had a slight update on yesterday was so this is, I mean, obviously specific to Moscow and St. Petersburg. So Moscow opens vaccination stations in Riviera and Gagarinki Mals. In St. Petersburg, the vaccination is launched in 4 miles. So it doesn't tell us what the numbers are, but does suggest that this rollout is beginning to happen and is open. I think the other thing, it says no appointment is required, so these seem to be walking clinics. So obviously as that happens, then the numbers will grow. Assuming people want the vaccines, you know, the numbers will grow quite quickly. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Here's an interesting one. Again, it should have been it probably best to Sarah Pilbeam, but sadly she's not here. Approximately how many British nationals are still based in Russia?
We did all this analysis, obviously, while we were trying to help the people who wanted to leave go. I'm looking at Trevor. Was it? Look, I think I'm going to have to pass because I don't have the number in my head. We did. This was something that we were doing a lot of work on when it wasn't possible for people to easily leave and we had to help. But I'm not sure, and we don't keep sort of central records on these things. We used to try, and we discovered that it didn't work.
Thank you. Next question for Trevor. Is the embassy, and actually for me as well, and the chamber, participating or supporting any activities within the Russia Year of Science and Technology? Is there anything you could share on it?
There's nothing I can share on, because it's not, because we've got a slightly separate science team, so they would know a little bit more, and we've got a new British council director as well, so they would probably do some of the work on the collaboration there. I think instinctively, I would say it's the sort of thing that we would want to be doing, because it's a fairly safe area. And remember, we had back in November 2019, we had a number of vice chancellors came over from UK universities, and a lot of the work around that, and a lot of the sort of areas of comfort for them to work together was around science and research and development. So I say instinctively, it's an area where I think we should be doing more, and I suspect we probably are, but I don't have the detail, I'm afraid. I don't know if the ambassador.
So we are. I mean, as I said, despite the sort of difficulties we have, actually, this is an area where we are doing more. And as Trevor says, we had a big delegation of vice chancellors came over in November 2019. We had planned to do the return visit last year. That didn't happen because of COVID. We did have the former, well, he was then the chief executive of the British Council, came over in November 2020 for a visit to keep and had a follow-up meeting to keep that process going. We've had another virtual meeting 10 days ago between vice chancellors and universities here, and we're hoping that we can host a really big delegation from Russia in the UK, assuming COVID allows and all the restrictions allow us to, probably now in the autumn of this year. So that's one area. We've got, I know the FCDO chief scientific advisor also has very strong links into Russian science, and she's hoping to come back as well as soon as that's possible, in order to pick those up and encourage further links. But there's actually an awful lot going on, and so much that I don't think we can even put we don't even really have a strong enough handle on it, because we've got Russian researchers and scientists and British researchers and scientists sort of talking to one another, engaging all the time in a way that makes sense for both of them.
Great, thank you. Next question is about travel. Regarding the flight suspension, do you get any notice in advance that the ban will cease or extend, or is it day before? Obviously, lots of people are trying to get back to Russia and very keen to have a bit of forewarning.
Yeah. We don't get much notice, and I don't think the decisions are taken very far in advance. We do obviously on a regular basis talk to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and to the transport authorities. The decision that was taken to suspend flights was taken very soon after the Prime Minister's announcement, something like, wasn't it, the 19th of December, and where he announced that because of the variant that had been identified and the impact of it, that we were going back into much greater restrictions in England, and that came into effect very quickly, and then the Russians very quickly took the decision after that. All I can say is I'm hoping that, given that we've got the news is very positive, and hopefully it will continue to get better, that as we go into March next week, that flights will restart again, direct flights will restart again. But we'll continue talking to the Russian authorities about it. I do want to say, though, I think on this one, all governments are trying to work out how to respond to these new variants, and it is difficult, and we are all trying to work out how we do it in the right way to protect our citizens. And in the UK, for example, we have very strict controls over anyone coming in from South Africa or Brazil, or some of the other places where new variants have been identified. It's a really difficult one for governments.
Thank you very much. Another one on coronavirus, and we've touched upon it, but probably not directly. What's your view on the situation in Moscow itself and the immediate environs of Moscow, in terms of which way the...
Look, we are still maintaining quite tough restrictions on ourselves in the embassy, and we're all wearing our masks when we're out and about, and I'm on my own in this office, so I don't have a mask on, but if I had someone else in here, I would have a mask on. It's certainly, when I look around the broader British and diplomatic community, it feels like things are definitely better than they were in November, December, where it really didn't feel good. In Moscow, again, that was also, you could see that reflected in in many places in elsewhere in Europe too. It does feel better now, but I think we've all learned that, these, new variants can come up, and we all just need to be really careful. So we will continue to be really careful, but I mean, interested in what folks think who are on the call and in Moscow, but my sense is things are better. And certainly if you look at the hospitalisation rates, it does look as if some of the hospitals and beds are being repurposed away from COVID back towards normal usage. And we're certainly not having any difficulty accessing healthcare in Moscow, which is one of the indicators that we look at.
Great, thank you very much. One for you, Trevor. What is the current level of cooperation in the space industry? Any prospects for future, for more?
No, well, it's not one that we've done very much in my time here, and I think there'll be some sort of general international sort of links as far as space is concerned. The ambassador's nodding on that, but not on a commercial basis. No, and obviously it's quite a sensitive area, as you might imagine anyway. So I think it would be quite a difficult one in terms of sort of engagement on that. But if anyone's got any good ideas where they think there's a safe area that we could work on in the space, if you forgive the pun, then happy to look at that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if it counts, but I know that Inmarsat and the big Russian national company Marsat have just linked up and are working together in the satellite sphere. Whether that counts as space, I suppose it does. But yeah. Great, thank you very much. And I have another one on again for Trevor. This is on the on cultural collaboration, and despite the poor political relationship between the UK and Russia, do you feel there's any opportunity for further cultural collaboration?
I can take it. Maybe the ambassador wants to take it, but yes is the answer. I think I don't know, ambassador, if you want to say more.
We do a lot already. Obviously, it's been hit, as everything else has, by COVID. But our cultural team here, our British Council team, have all sorts of plans for 2021, and we're just hoping that conditions will allow for all of that to continue. And we're thinking about. Many of you will know that we had a really successful UK-Russia Year of Music. I mean, again, the end of that was rather disrupted by COVID and the lockdowns and so on. But we are talking to the Russian government about, what do we do next? And we're at a reasonably good stage, I think, in terms of thinking about what that might be. I mean, clearly the theme for us for this year is all about low carbon and climate. It's all about how do we, in recovering both the way our economies and our societies function, how do we do that in a way that tackles climate change? And so that's the centre of quite a lot of the things we're doing with Russia at the moment. But we are also thinking about, what do we do in the cultural space after that? And I think it will be, there'll be hopefully some exciting things coming on that in that area.
Alf, you'd be pleased to know I've got some statistics as well on the Year of Music, because I know you like them. So in the Year of Music 2019-20 involved 477 UK artists in 235 concerts, workshops and other activities in 34 cities across Russia. So that just, I think, is a very good indication of, I think there was a question about soft power as well, but I think that's a very good indication of where cultural relationships and soft powers gets us out, UK and Russia working together across a large sort of, space in Russia. Thanks.
Yeah, and I believe the Britain's Shostakovich Orchestra has got funding for another tour, coronavirus allowing, obviously. So that's, again, a good example.
Yeah, so we're hoping there'll be some really, we'll be able to do that in September. I'm conscious that September's starting to look really busy as we push quite a lot into it. I think just to reassure everyone on the call, we are certainly hoping that that conditions will allow us to do a lot more as we move into summer and autumn, and certainly that 2021 in those months will be a lot better than 2020 could be.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we're coming to the end of our time now. We've had some fantastic questions covering a whole range of subjects. I'll finish off with one final question to Trevor, really. Very important for the RBCC, given the topic. Is there any clarity on when travel restrictions will be lifted between the UK and Russia for those traveling for business, as opposed to just more general travel? And I know Sarah probably would have taken this one.
Well, not that I'm aware of, no. And I think as the Ambassador mentioned, at the moment, my understanding is that 17th of May is the review date, not just for Russia. This is a global thing for travel, and I suspect that's probably when we'll find out what the restrictions may be. Because I think someone's mentioned day 2, day 8 testing and things like that. It's obviously a central government decision being taken in London, so you know we will roll with that when we know what the answer to those questions are.
Okay, yeah. Because I mean, the HQS, if they're working in Russia, obviously they have a slightly different system and
yeah,
can travel slightly easier than non-HQS visa holders. So I suppose there's a hope that they may link the two at some point in the future. Anyways,
can I maybe just say, look, we really do appreciate that this is difficult for people, and certainly from an embassy perspective, we have all built our lives around, you know, ease of travel, and so it's something that we are very conscious of, and you know, we are all hoping, certainly from a UK end, that the conditions will allow significant easing as we move into the summer. And we're certainly talking to the Russian authorities about the restrictions on travel from the UK.
Great. Thank you very much. On that note, we'll have to draw stumps. Ambassador Trevor, thank you very much for your time. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, KPMG, for sponsoring the event, and of course to you, our listeners. I hope you'll join us next week. We have a number of events running. All the details are on the website. I think there's 3 or 4 going, so I hope we'll see some, if not all of you, on those. Thank you very much, and have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.